I like that you sit straight up every time, and I slouch down so low.
Right? I feel like I have to be on point here. Well, welcome everybody to our Creative Entrepreneur podcast. I am David Segall here with my fellow musical colleague, Connor Cherland. How's it going, Connor?
It's going well. It's
Good.
a nice day.
Yeah, it's a beautiful day. We're here in the new year. How's 2020 treating you so far?
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Watched a lot of movies.
Yeah?
Well, yeah.
Okay. Any ones that we ought to see?
Oh, yeah. If you haven't seen the Lord of the Rings trilogy, you got to get to it. I went to the dentist, and I have a thing with the dentist where I just hate it.
Yeah.
So I reward myself immensely. And so if I go to the dentist, that's all I had to do for the day. There's no other challenges I need to overcome. So I got home at 10 in the morning and was like, great, all the Lord of the Rings. I deserve it.
And did it inspire any new songs that were Lord of the Rings influenced?
No, but it's still so moving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You probably could get a lot of creative material out of that, just revisiting it.
You can.
A million times over.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I just got back from a trip up to the Pacific Northwest. Got to spend New Year's Eve at my cousin's wedding. He got married on New Year's Eve. Yeah. That was an interesting experience. It's like a free New Year's party. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a
it.
very bold statement. It's basically demanding your friends to party with you.
Yeah, pretty much. It was fun. It was good. Well, this is the second segment of our podcast series. How many are we doing? 5 or 6 of these?
We're doing 6.
We're doing 6 of them. Okay.
Yeah.
And today we wanted to talk about meditation, self-care, and the part that it plays in our journey as entrepreneurs or creative multitaskers.
Right, because the sort of counterbalance is stress and the feeling of stress.
Yeah.
And just this kind of gnawing in the back of your brain that happens when you work for yourself.
Right.
And it says you should be busy right now.
Exactly.
Regardless of the time or place or setting.
Right.
And that we have found a way to work against that and like work for ourselves in meditation, yoga, and caring for ourselves.
Yeah, we want to talk about that a little bit today because both Connor and I have talked about this individually in terms of the role that, for me, like I come from more of a yoga background and perspective, and Connor was sharing with me that he's been using, what's the app, Mindful?
No, Headspace.
The Headspace app. And is that what introduced you to meditation?
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
So we wanted to just compare and talk about our experiences with the practice and how it's helped us to essentially create longevity. I think is really in a big way what it's about, because I know so many entrepreneurs and people out there just experience burnout because of what you were talking about, just constantly going, doing. And it's interesting because fellows like you and I who don't have typical 9 to 5 jobs and make our own work and schedule, it can almost be more challenging to rest because that it's all, basically it's on our shoulders. So we're always thinking about, I need to do this and I need to do this. It's kind of the never-ending to-do list, right? And so, it's that question of how do we balance that? How do we carve out space in our busy lives, because all of us have busy lives, to ground, to connect, to center, to calm, to be still, and basically to recharge, because we all know if we don't take the time to do that, we eventually just hit a wall. And in my experience, when you hit that wall of burnout, it ends up doing way more detrimental damage to your schedule and the recovery time than it would have if we just carved out the time to rest, to relax, essentially, to meditate. Why don't you start a little bit about the role meditation has played in your creative journey?
Great. So I come from the high school volleyball background, the jock mindset.
Really? I wouldn't have guessed that.
Yeah.
You've come a long way.
I carry myself so demure that you wouldn't know that it's actually a correction from where I was in my life. But that mindset is work hard and continue to push yourself, always continue to push yourself.
Yeah.
which works when you're under the guidance of a manager or a coach, someone who there's built-in boundaries, and you push as hard as you possibly can for as long as you possibly can while the coach is around. And while the coach is around, there's no game, there's no practice, so why would you push that hard? So that already is a change in mindset, and I think I kind of took that for granted, as well as having a manager at my first job, and like the desire for like more output only existed between a certain span of hours, and immediately after that ended, I could turn my brain off and do whatever I wanted.
Exactly. That's a good point. And I think a lot of, and what you're describing, I feel like a lot of my friends who work in the corporate world, or the, where they're working for another company or whatever, are kind of in that zone where they work really hard while they're at work, and sometimes when they go home too. But when they're away from work, they just, they just tune that out and turn on the television or go out to eat or whatever it is, right?
Being able to segment your life in that way is a really good skill, because everyone needs to do that in order to focus on anything at one time. So if I am talking to my wife about her day and the things that she's going through, I'm like, if I'm actually listening, it means that I'm not thinking about my work. I'm not working during that time. And that's really important in order to have relationships, in order to like do anything else.
Right.
So immediately when I quit my 9-to-5 and started doing this full time, I had this crazy nagging feeling in the back of my head that there was no time for rest. There was no time to do, and I don't think I articulated it that way, but it was more so like this accuser in the back of my brain saying, you could do this, you could do this.
Right.
And so anytime I would hear him, I'd be like, right. And then I would stop what I was doing. That was like relaxing. And then I'd go back to work. But that, it like created this really weird cycle with guilt and frustration with myself. I was in like a frustration loop where I'm like frustrated because I'm not where I want to be. So I do some work, and now I'm frustrated because that work isn't getting me to where I want to be.
Right.
So versus like doing good work every day.
Right.
Which is much calmer.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that brings up a good point. I mean, for me, it's like, it's about a balance of productivity and space, right? And really, in my mind, the way I look at it, I think of productivity and creativity as synonymous. I mean, essentially, when we're being productive, we're being creative, and vice versa. It's interesting because in that like never-ending to-do list that we all have, and we've talked about this a little bit in our first segment about this concept of how do we balance our left brain and our right brain, because we all know, whether we're in the arts or music or business or finance, whatever, it's very helpful and beneficial to have a balance to both those sides. And to me, that equates to what I was just talking about, a balance between productivity, which is more left brain, and space, which is right brain. And because for me, it's the ideas and the inspiration come out of the space. They come out of the stillness. And it's like, then when a gem appears, whether it's a great business idea or a great song, then you can take that gem and you can be productive. You can start to grind it down. You can start to polish it, start to present it to the world. Has that been your experience at all, in terms of like, with the practice of meditation or yoga, or even contemplative walks in nature, that's where, ideas come, new songs, or just even ideas about creative avenues that you hadn't contemplated before?
For me, I would agree that it happens a lot in the space times, like, because one of my biggest margins is my drive time between gigs, and I travel a lot for gigs, so it's like an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours to a gig, which means I spent 4 hours in a day just like driving, listening to music or listening to an audiobook. And it's that time that I'm like keeping a note of things that are popping through my brain, things that are like piquing my interest. But I would say meditation hasn't given me any inspiration, but it has given me the practice to watch thoughts pass through my mind and to notice which thoughts happen with more frequency, and then to ask myself, which of these thoughts am I more attached to? None of these are like judgments. It's just like, wow, I feel really attached to that thought. Wow, who cares? Who cares?
Right.
And that's really helpful, because then when a thought does come by, I can see if it's just like a cute, like, oh, that's like a cute phrase that I could use in a song, or like, oh, this is something I really care about that I need to be writing about, because I need to, like, there's a lot internally I need to work through in this topic.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think this brings up another good question to me, which we didn't really talk about this, but what is meditation? Because meditation is something that it's a pretty loosely used word.
Yes.
And yes, taking a walk can be meditative. Going for a paddle on your surfboard or kayak can be meditative. Driving can be meditative. And I do believe that there's the Zen practice and all of those things. But I think what you were touching upon, we should maybe expound upon a little bit, which is meditation. If you distill it down to this concept of sitting in stillness, it is a practice of what you were talking about, in the sense becoming aware and observing. And for many of you who've taken beginning meditation classes, one of the first things the teacher will tell you is observe your breath. Notice your breathing, watch the inhale and the exhale and that kind of a thing. But I would share with me a little bit about your definition of meditation. Is it what you were just sharing, which is basically just observing the thought stream as it comes through and just consciously letting go?
It's within Headspace. I don't know almost anything about meditation other than I've been using Headspace since November 15th. So it's been like 2 full months of me using it almost every day. And that's what I've noticed is it seems like it's trying to strengthen your muscle for focus and mental focus. Saying, I want you to just have a soft focus on the room. Just notice the room that you're in. You're going to now close your eyes, and we're just going to hear the sounds of the room. Like, are there any smells? Notice the weight of your back on the seat. Notice, like, your feet on the floor, your hands on your legs. Now we're going to notice our breath. So you move from this outward thing. You, like, see all the visuals. Then you turn off the visuals, and you pay attention to all the, like, audio and the physical sensations. And then you turn it even, like, more in, and then you only, like, focus on your breath. And then, like, then it kind of goes into different spaces. Like, you'll do a visualization where you'll, like, imagine a piece of light that exists in your body, and you'll associate it with, like, contentment, and you'll let that expand out to the fullness of your body, to your neighbors, to your friends, like, to your city, and then the whole world as far as you can possibly stretch it. And then that's the end of the exercise. And then it brings you back kind of in those same stages. So it's been really helpful.
That's great. And, just for all the listeners and viewers out there, I have not tried Headspace yet, and I look forward to trying it.
This is also not sponsored.
Not yet. Right. But it's fascinating for me to listen to this because I started getting into meditation and yoga in the days before smartphones and apps and all that, and I just ended up, for whatever reason, taking yoga classes and things. But a lot of times there'd be a portion of each class where the teacher would guide you in a way that's similar to what you're talking about. And to me, it brings to mind a few really important things, which is what you're talking about. Cultivating focus is probably the most important thing to being an effective or empowered creator in this world. And distraction is probably our greatest enemy, especially in this day and age where we have these little devices we carry around with us that every few seconds we get a ping of a notification of that and this person commented on that and all the baloney. And it's funny because, let's be honest, that's designed to distract us. The advertising world, in a sense, is also designed to distract us. Because when we're distracted,
if it's not distracting you, it's not doing its job.
Yeah, when we're distracted, then we can be kind of corralled and diverted, and so it's interesting because we think we have to be doing all these things, got to do this, got to do that. And yes, of course, we have our responsibilities in the real world. But if we're not taking time to exercise focus, to develop our focus muscle, then we're essentially disempowering ourselves ultimately. Yes. And so when I think of the purpose of meditation, from a spiritual standpoint, they say it's the purpose of meditation is to merge into the infinite, merge into God, merge into the universe. There's no separation between you and all that is. Mm-hmm. And I like that. I like that. But I also think that from the left brain side of things, the pragmatic side, the purpose of meditation is also to focus our power, mm-hmm. and to essentially raise and increase our awareness. Mm-hmm. Because as we know, the more our sphere of awareness expands, the more opportunities we have, the more opportunities we have to serve and to be of service and to offer our gifts to the world. And we become more empowered because we know we have a greater vocabulary. We're more fluid. We're more flexible. Mm-hmm. It's like with realization comes opportunity, comes liberation in a sense, because you're then free to, I didn't know I could go down this path. I never even thought about approaching it from this angle.
Yeah, and Headspace uses the language of noticing. You can't address a problem that you haven't noticed, mm-hmm. and the exercises are designed to increase your ability to notice things. And you carry a very, very Zen, chill, hippie vibe with you wherever you go. What would stress look like for someone like you? I'm sure people look at you, like every picture that you're in, you're smiling, and every interaction that you have in public is like this very warm, calm thing.
Yeah.
So what was there a breaking point that you needed to discipline yourself to maintain because you weren't doing yoga every day mm-hmm. at some point in your life,
right? And
then there was a switch. And what does stressed out Dave look like?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I've gotten that feedback a lot. People who don't know me super well, or even who do, they say, you have this energy of peace. And I really appreciate that because to me, it's an objective, in a sense, an affirmation, I guess, that the practice is working, because in my head, I've felt like the most neurotic and kind of spazzed out person for most of my life. I mean, I shouldn't say the most neurotic, but I've like so many of us have grappled with my own neuroses and had to learn to make peace with and subdue the monkey mind, mm-hmm. as they say. So, obviously I still experience stress, and that's the thing too, is stress is a part of life. It's not going away. We actually need it to a certain extent, just like we need fear to a certain extent. And that's going to be one of our topics, I think, in the next chapter, how to use fear and even how to use stress as a motivating factor and mm-hmm. to turn it around, almost like a martial arts kind of a way to flip it on its back. For me, stress arises, as a performer when I'm putting on a big show where I have to get the people to come. I'm in charge of ticket sales or whatever. I'm not just going and performing for some event where there's going to be people there. I get anxious about, I've got to make sure I reach out to this person and that person and get all these ducks in a row. And I, like everybody, get ahead of myself. That's to me is anxiousness, is projecting too far into the future instead of just stopping and going, okay, in this moment, what can I do to start checking off that important to-do list?
Right.
And so that's what stress looks like for me. Usually it's at shows, bigger shows, where I know I've got to bring with me my T-shirts and merch and make sure I've got somebody to sell the merch, and I've got to make sure there's somebody at the door. And this is why we're working so hard on diligently on manifesting a great management team and, right, touring manager and all this. So we don't have to think about those things because that obviously will free us up a lot. So it's usually, for me, the stress arises from the juggling act and sometimes feeling overwhelmed with how many, pardon the pun, how many balls are in the air, you know what I mean? And so, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Does that, okay.
That makes sense. I also feel very stressed when my money's on the line.
Yeah.
But it's money and it's a little bit of like pride and reputation as well. So like if you put on a show and you're the headliner and nobody shows up, it means you're terrible. So there's like an internalization. So you have like a double investment in the results.
Yeah.
You know that you'll internalize a little bit if it flops.
Yeah, and that brings up another good point in my mind, which is that a lot of times our thought patterns are motivated by fear. And it's like, because I know exactly what you're talking about. At every event I've ever put on, I've always thought, what if enough people don't come? What if I lose money and it's a waste of time or whatever? And that comes from a fear of being feeling inadequate or not valued or whatever it is. And one of the most effective tools for me, and this definitely ties into meditation or the meditative practices, is mantra or positive self-dialogue or just a positive conversation with yourself, which is essentially, for me, there was a certain point in my practice of all, the mindfulness practices, I'll say, yoga, meditation, whatnot, where you begin to distance yourself a little bit from that monkey mind, from just the thought train, and understand, wait a minute, I am not this conveyor belt of thoughts. This is just a conveyor belt of thoughts that is being operated by my past experiences, essentially, right? And so here is where taking a deep breath is so powerful, because you take a deep breath and you pause and you say, whatever that positive self-talk might be. For me, it's generally that, I am love and I am loving and I am loved, and love attracts good things to it, to itself. Things of that kind, or
That's
going back to
beautiful mantra.
And then there's that, for those of you who are old enough to remember Saturday Night Live in the early 90s, the Stuart Smalley skits of, I'm good enough. He'd look in the mirror and say, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me.
That's so cute.
And even that works to a certain extent. I mean, it's funny.
Yeah.
It's cheesy. It's hilarious. But if you can look, and actually, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but sometimes when I do stop and look in the mirror, it helps me to put a good cushion, healthy boundaries between me and my ego mind, and say, you know what, all is well. The right people are going to show up. The right people are coming to this event, or whatever, however you want to phrase that. The right customers are coming to find this product, in the business world. Right. And I'm doing the best I can, and I'm continually learning. I'm continually growing. Even if I fall, even if this event is a quote unquote failure, it's still a lesson. It's still a valuable lesson, and it still contributes to my overall wealth.
Right.
Put that in your pipe and smoke it.
I like it. I feel like we're both very big proponents on this, so we're not necessarily like selling each other on the topic of it, and we see like the overall benefits of what's happening. Why do you, like, if you were to give a sales pitch to like putting into practice these things every day to say like some other musician living in LA right now, why would you say that it's so vitally important? Because I would say that it's like an early death if you don't start young. Like if you don't start these practices now, I felt like I was carrying it in my body, and
you were,
and
we all do that. Yeah.
and I was carrying it. I felt really on edge,
Yeah.
like I was about to yell. Like that's how I felt all the time. Like I was about to snap anytime.
Yeah.
Which is a really bad place to be.
Right.
Especially when you're like, your job is to be a light in the world and like spreading
That's right.
good art.
That's right.
And people would say like the smallest thing. I mean, people take jabs at me all day.
Yeah.
And I normally can take them, and I
Yeah.
can take them with a grain of salt and have fun.
Yeah.
And sometimes someone would take like the smallest little jab, and I could just feel myself like cock a fist, and I'd be yeah. So what?
Sit back and observe that for a minute, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Not so easy to do in the moment. Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say that
like why is this a must versus
why? Yeah.
versus a maybe?
Yeah. It is a must because, and again, just speaking from personal experience, it is what will sustain us on the long and winding road ahead of us. And let's be honest, life, while it's beautiful and it's magical, it also is incredibly challenging.
Right.
Not all the time, thank God, but many times it is incredibly challenging. And a lot of people, as we know, a lot of us sometimes don't make it past certain really challenging summits that we're facing. And so a mindfulness practice of meditation or yoga or nature immersion helps us to get through the obstacles that we don't consciously know how we're going to get through.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's so beautiful about the practice to me, is that we think we have to figure everything out on our own. And while our logical mind is a very useful tool, it by no means holds all the answers. And for me, inspiration, which comes from within, inspiration, is what it's sort of like a river that carries us through the dark night of the soul, or whatever it might be, those low points of life. And whatever those let's be honest, those low points are really stagnation. We're stuck in our bodies, or we're stuck in the past, or whatever it might be. And so creating space, allowing time for stillness, it's essentially like creating the opportunity for the clouds to part. And there's nothing that we had to do other than, like you were describing, just sit, observe the breath, watch the thoughts, let them go. Like one great analogy I've heard, and many of you probably heard this, is that it's, the monkey mind is kind of like a conveyor belt of thoughts.
Yeah.
And we have the choice. Oh, did it go out? Oh, okay. All right, closing the blinds. Okay. Lights keep coming on. Yeah, the monkey mind is like a conveyor belt of thoughts where we get to choose what we take and what we put back. And a lot of times we pick up thoughts that are self-defeating thoughts. And so getting into that practice of putting those back and letting them go, and not holding on to those kinds of thoughts as our own.
Right.
And another thing that you mentioned that reminded me of something is when you were saying that you felt like you stored a lot of that negative energy or fear or worry or doubt, whatever you want to call it, in your body. That is a known fact, from a somatic side of things, that we all carry. We literally carry emotion in our bodies. We carry energy. Some of it's latent, dormant. Some of it's active. We carry it in our bodies. And that is why practices like Qigong, Tai Chi, really any of the martial arts, yoga, even running, walking, so important, because we are energy. Like, let's be honest, our bodies are composed of vibrating atoms.
Right.
And molecules. We are energy. And so energy has to move. It has to be in circulation. And we're also 75% water, something like that. So water has to be in motion. If water within us gets stagnant, then that's when disease and illnesses are bred and things like that. So I just wanted to talk about that for a minute because for me personally, the movement and the physical aspect of a practice like Qigong, Tai Chi, and yoga were so important as precursors to sitting in meditation, because doing those movement practices first allow us to release energy that has been stuck in our bodies, and it enables us to sit more comfortably and peaceably, and to be able to sit with our breath and let the mind train slow down.
Right.
And I do know there are some people out there who they don't necessarily need that physical side. Some people are just really good at tuning in to that inner stillness and space, but most of us really need, I'm talking 99.99% of us really need some meditative fluid movement practice, whether it's yoga, asana, like I said, qigong, those kind of things, to get us relaxed, essentially, to open the body, relax the body, be able to sit and just be with the stillness.
One of the things you mentioned was meditation. It prepares us for this long journey, and I don't think that meditation is the source of anything that we do, but I think it is like the oil that
Absolutely.
we need to replace in the car. And if we are like, the car will break down, the car will stop running should the oil grow too old. And like that, like, I wouldn't call it the gas.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't call it the wheels, but
right.
It's that thing that I don't know cars. End of
Yeah,
analogy.
no, well, I think another fitting analogy maybe would be like the water that we intake.
Mm-hmm.
Water isn't food. Like, we need food. That's the gas, the energy that gets us bodies moving. But we do need it to stay alive. Yeah. And it keeps everything flowing. That's what the oil is in a car. It keeps things lubricated and well running. And I agree. Yeah.
One of the things that one of my favorite authors, theologians, mystics, his name is John O'Donohue, and he writes a lot of books that talk about thresholds. And threshold used to have the meaning of like to thrash, meaning when you're threshing wheat, you're separating. It's a separation, and you were one thing. You were this like wheat thing, like this wheat, however the heck you pull it off a plant, and then after a threshing, there's the wheat and there's the chaff. And he's saying that is a threshold. It was that. It crossed a threshold, and it was never the same. And we, as people, need to understand that there's a lot of thresholds in this life, and there are like significant tests.
Yes.
And I say it with like almost a frown, because a lot of the tests that I've gone through haven't been like glory. Like, I walk through them and I feel like, wow, I can't believe I did that. Like that almost feels like it wasn't me, but it is you. It's because you've practiced these helpful things over and over again, so that by the time a threshold happens, you can walk through it worthily, is like the way that he would say it. And I think that this is why there's like so much poor mental health in especially like within creatives. I think that's why there's so much desire for like infidelity and heavy drinking and substance abuse, because we're talking about a practice that you can take with you and do as much as you like. Yeah. And it will continue to help you and continue to grow. That's right. Strong, like, I'm not talking about people adopting my virtues. I'm saying like, it will help you adopt your own set of values and hold to them and say like, I am this kind of person. And I always get worried about people who feel like they're burning out, because it makes you susceptible. Like, it makes you very vulnerable to whatever bad thing is offered in front of you.
That's right.
Because you could get to a place where you feel so uncomfortable and someone says, you should do this for relief. And then you take it. because you know that like you feel like that could help you, versus knowing in your heart, like, how do I find, like, I know how to find relief. I know how to find peace. And yeah, meditation is super helpful for that. This also goes into like the realm of religion and faith and values in general, but like, without getting into that, just like meditation has allowed me to become a little bit more succinct with who I want to be, what I believe, and how to treat myself when I fail at that. Which is much more kind than I used to be. Yeah. Speaking of mantra, self-talk,
very important.
Like self-kindness is really important for me because I'm bad at it. But
yeah, I think most of us, it's very challenging. Yeah. This self-love or self-appreciation.
My parents love to tell this story where when I was a kid, they would find me in my room crying, like in a corner, and they'd be like, "Connor, what's wrong?" I'd be like, "I'm grounded." They'd be like, "What? Would nobody ground you?" And I'd be like, "I grounded myself." And they were like, hilarious. "You don't need to ground yourself. Yeah. We will ground you."
Yeah, that's amazing. It was the battle of the id and the ego back then at an early point.
Yeah.
Well, that was beautifully said and shared, and I completely resonate with what you were discussing there. And to me, it points to the truth that ultimately the answers are within us. External things, teachers, books, experiences, they can point us towards those answers, but ultimately we discover them within ourselves. And the practice, the meditative arts is a practice of self-discovery, of discovery of truth within.
Yeah, David Foster Wallace said it should feel good in your tummy, meaning like in your gut.
Yep.
And he was really big on like being more in tune on what feels right in your tummy. And that's it's a childish word because it's a childish notion that you know the good thing, like you know the right thing, and to move forward with that and to not waver.
And that is a beautiful segue into our next podcast, which is going to cover the topic of fear versus self-love or self-appreciation and the cultivation of higher intuition. Because that feeling of what you're talking about, of feeling good in the stomach, to me that is the antithesis of the feeling of fear, which usually is this like hardening of the heart, the knots in the heart. Yeah. So that's one thing we're going to discuss in terms of how to cultivate the awareness of knowing when we're being pushed by fear as opposed to motivated by love or positive intention, I guess is another way we could say that.
Right.
How to know the difference, and also how do we flip fear onto its back and use it and turn it into an ally. Yeah,
and I guess we can lump a lot of negative emotions in there, like specifically like shame.
Right.
Because those typically like the detractor, things that don't help you with creativity but are extremely strong emotions, how do you use them for your creativity? Like all your pain, how do you transform that into
Thanks everybody for tuning in. I'm David Segall here with Connor Cherland, and I want to encourage you to go check out his music on Spotify and all the major streaming platforms. Follow him and check out his website, connorcherland.com, and you can find me everywhere as well. And we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Peace and love.